Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! Well, we kind of have a dark coffee talk today, because today we're talking about the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine thanks to coffee. Once again, you gotta laugh to keep from crying. So, the world has certainly changed in a week. And before we get started, I do have to tip the hat to some of the October 4th doomsday prophets. Now, obviously, nobody who had the jabby jabby turned into a zombie because of the tone coming from your phone on October 4th. But there was a group of, I guess you could say, Christian scientists, not Christian Science, but scientists who happen to be Christians, who are very much involved in astronomy, who tied certain events in the book of Revelation to a comet moving through Virgo. I won't get into that, I believe, Revelation 12 discussion, but it was the only part of the October 4th panic that I gave any credence to, and I vowed to watch it and see if anything came from it. Right? I don't believe in a pre-tribulation rapture, maybe a mid-trib, but I pretty much believe we're going to have to see it through. And to many of you evangelical Christians, charismatic Pentecostal types, that just seems like heresy, because the rapture is such a part of those denominations and belief systems. But historically, the idea of a pre-tribulation rapture is relatively a new thing. And about 1800 years of Christianity, most everyone believed that the second coming, the rapture, and the resurrection of the dead all happened on the same day. So that's kind of what I've reverted back to. And if you're in the pre-tribulation rapture camp, I'd be nervous right now, because either you're wrong or you got left behind. Because in a previous video, I talked about how I believe we are in the end times, the end of the world as we know it. Don't. Gotta laugh to keep from crying. I hope you don't think I'm making fun of this dire position that the world has found themselves in, where everything seemed to be messed up, but it was kind of, it's like snafu, situation normal, all effed up, right? That we were kind of rolling along, especially here in America, with some semblance of normalcy. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, right after October 4th, just right after that, we had this massive attack by Hamas into Israel, the brutal slaying of Israeli men, women, and children, non-combatant civilians, young adults engaging in a all-night rave. 260 of them were killed, and the death toll in Israel right now has reached about 1,300. And so immediately, I'm just replaying the events of the last week. Immediately, the bombing started in Gaza. Within a couple of days, while they were still rounding up these 1,000 insurgents who had infiltrated into Israel, the bombings in Gaza started. Gaza City, in just a matter of days, was pretty much leveled, and it caused massive loss of life. One of the interesting statistics I found coming out of Gaza is that about half the people in Gaza are children. That they have a lot of children there, to the point where it's about 50% of the population. The death toll, the last check that I saw, was approaching 2,000 dead Palestinians. Most of them, nearly all of them, civilians. And half of those being children. So, Moses said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Jesus told us to love our enemies. And I guess decency is somewhere in between the impossible task of loving your enemy and the rather rigid biblical Old Testament standard of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But even by the harsh Old Testament standard of an eye and an eye and a tooth for a tooth, when you add up the actual numbers, yeah, Palestine paid a huge price for this brutal attack against Israel. And Israel has already exceeded the biblical limit, the Mosaic limit of revenge. Revenge has been extracted many times over. You've got the official numbers are reaching 2,000, somewhere between 1,890 and 2,000 dead Palestinians. You do the math on that, you're looking at least 800 to 900 dead children, which greatly exceeds the number of children killed in the Israeli attack, the attack against Israel. And but that's discounting the 1,000 insurgents that were also killed by the Israelis, rightfully so. They hunted these mad dogs down and killed every one of them. I don't think they took any of them alive, although I did see one clip of an of a Hamas insurgent that had penetrated into Israel that was captured alive. And I don't know how long he stayed alive, right? I haven't seen them parading any of these terrorists around, and I reckon if they had them, they would. So their intention was to kill them all, and I believe they have. And so that's 1,800 mostly civilians plus 1,000 insurgents. That's 2,800 dead Palestinians. The number that you can estimate is going to be a minimum of 800 children involved in that. And we don't know how many more bodies of men, women, and children lay under the rubble of the bombed Gaza city. Then, and I honestly, this video is going to be about trying to predict what's next. And I'm going to paint a dire picture because I believe this is how it's going. Now, to be certain, this is not necessarily based in revelation or end-time prophecy. This video, hence the war hat here, the squatching hat, is purely from a physical perspective, from my experience growing up in a military family and my news hound experience and my historical expertise. So all of that is combining in this video, which is a prediction video. I do believe that the attack into Israel was absolutely the last straw for Israelis. And they collectively as a people, and most certainly were unanimous in the leadership and military forces in Israel, that this is we're going to end this. We're going to make sure this never happens again. You know, the Israelis have been very tight-lipped about what it is they intend to do, right? And I think a lot of us thought they just bomb the snot out of them, maybe go into tunnels and clear out some of these tunnels and hunt these Hamas on the ground in Palestine, in Gaza. However, maybe because of the danger of that or the pure outrage, what they ended up doing was bombing Gaza into the Stone Age. And they have recently, just as of I believe yesterday, sent some strike teams in, covered by armor groups, tanks, and they were able to penetrate some of these tunnels. They did not find any hostages. All they found was more dead Israelis, which means they are killing the hostages. So you can add the 150 hostages, including 12 to 14 Americans, to the list of dead, I'm sure. And so if they stopped right now, I think they adequately paid back what they got. But that's not the intention. Their intention never was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. They've been doing that for too long. I believe that's how they see it. And they are looking for a final solution. Don't. Isn't it funny how the oppressed sometimes end up becoming the oppressor? It's almost a stereotypical response over time. Don't. I do think Israel sees this as their opportunity to move on the tragedy that they have, the very public and videotaped and uploaded to the internet by the attackers themselves. I mean, these people, they kind of get the Dumb Criminal Award. But yeah, they put up the massacre themselves many times onto social media. Everything was documented by the terrorists themselves. And I do believe that Israel sees this as their grand opportunity to come to a final solution of the Palestinian issue. So what do they intend to do? Because obviously if they were just intending to even the score, they did it times 2 already. If they just intended to cripple Gaza City and grind it to a halt, mission accomplished. But yesterday they dropped thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of leaflets from airplanes. And I guess it was a nice break from the bombs that have been falling from airplanes for the past week. And these pamphlets were instructing the people of Gaza that they were basically, Gaza is occupied by a terrorist organization and they need to flee this area so that they can be cleaned out, so they can clean out Hamas. And they're telling all of the civilians in Gaza to vacate and form a mass exodus of estimated of around 1.2 million people to move south into the bottom half of the Gaza Strip. If Gaza Strip was already crowded, if you take all those people and move them into half the space, what you have is a million homeless people descending on a place where there was barely enough for the locals to survive. And you're basically squashing the whole population of Gaza into half of the Gaza Strip. So with that in mind, what is the intention? Because all the Israelis will say is they have a right to self-defense, this is self-defense, and that they intend to put an end to Hamas forever. How do you put an end to a infiltrated terrorist organization that is intertwined with the public and using citizens and children as human shields? How do you do that? Well, there's only one way. Logic dictates that this is what they'll do to accomplish the goal of making sure Hamas never does this again. And Israel, I believe at first, had no regard whatsoever for the children of Gaza. They had no regard whatsoever for the civilians of Gaza. They flattened these buildings, most of them without any warning. Then they would give them a 3 to 5 minute text message sent out to all the cell phones. And the thing is, America, everybody's got a cell phone, even your kids, but that's not the case in third world countries. There might be one cell phone in an entire family. So let's just say the warnings were too little too late. And this is what accounts for much of the death toll up to this point. However, I believe at the many images of these children being taken out of these apartment buildings that were flattened, sometimes taking them out dead, sometimes taking them out gravely injured, sometimes luckily they were able to help trapped people from under the rubble come out more or less unscathed. And I do believe that response, the extremity of the response, the 3-to-1 kill ratio in favor of Israel at this point, caused most of the Arab world to go, wait a minute, don't make us come down there. Don't make us come down there. The ambassador for Jordan recently had a conference with Blinken, I believe, and in that discussion, he said that he did not see a way where this wouldn't escalate into a wider war. That's Jordan's way of saying, don't make us come over there. And I do believe that the Arab world, from the far reaches of Iran and Iraq all the way to Cairo and north, well into Syria and Lebanon, that the growing opinion of all Arab leaders and people on the street that it's on like Donkey Kong. They can see what I'm about to lay out to you, and they are not going to stand for it. And we'll talk about what that means to us, to Christians and to Americans in particular. So, what do the Russians plan to do? What's in their head? What is their tactic that they're not telling us? What is the one way that you can ensure that Hamas never does this again. The only way to be 100% certain that you make sure this never happens again, well, here's what they intend to do, in my opinion. We'll see if I'm right. It's going to play out over the next couple weeks. So, even though Gaza already has this incredibly difficult humanitarian crisis now, where all of these people are moving south, that if you wanted to just get the heck out of Dodge, if you wanted to just split, your only choice, because you can't split into the country you're at war with, is the Jaffa Gate, I believe it's called, the southern gate of Gaza, which leads into the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. And I think on day 2 or 3 of the bombing, the Israelis bombed that gate and made that crossing impassable. And the Egyptians won't repair it and try to open it, and the Gazans can't, the Palestinians can't, because of the constant bombardment. And it's pretty clear that if they bombed it the first time, if you were to go out there and try to open it, you'd get bombed again. So Israel doesn't intend to let the Gazans escape into Egypt. That they've closed Gaza off, and they've pinched these people into this tiny little strip, and they've completely isolated it. They're bombing it to pieces in the north, and they've called for all of the civilians. Finally, in my opinion, they should have dropped the leaflets on day 1 before they started dropping buildings. And I think the only reason they're dropping the leaflets now is that Israel doesn't want to deal with the international fallout, that they're trying to keep America and the European nations on their side. They don't want to expend all of the political juice they got out of being victims of this horrible, horrific terrorist attack. And I'm telling you, I'm not taking sides here in particular, as well, in my opinion, both sides are wrong. This thing has been FUBAR since 1947. The United Nations dropped the ball, and since then, it's just been one more tragedy after another. Tune into my sermon this weekend when I talk about how Israel was cursed and has lived under a curse for 2,000 years. And even though they have their nation again, they've never had peace. Not since they put our Savior on the cross. And we'll talk about that in a future video, a little teaser there. But back to the coffee talk. So what are they planning to do to make sure that Hamas is never able to do this again? Well, the final solution for the Israelis is to drive all of Palestinians into the smallest possible giant refugee camp, which is basically going to be at that bottleneck at the south of the Gaza Strip. Egypt will have to step up, and make an effort to open that gate, but Egypt is not sure they want to let 2 million Palestinians come into Egypt. Now you got to understand, this part of Egypt that we're referring to is the Sinai Peninsula. It's been battled back and forth at different times. It's been in the hands of the Egyptians. At different times, it's been in the hands of the Israelis. And it's gone back and forth, and right now it's Egypt. But it's a vast desert. And the only real populated areas of the Sinai are along the waterways. There's an arm of the Red Sea called the Gulf of... I'm sorry, I can't pull that name up right now. But if you look at the Red Sea, there's an arm of it that is 1,000 miles long and just a few miles wide, and it's an inland gulf. And so along the Red Sea, all up that gulf that borders Saudi on one side, Israel to the north, and the Egypt Peninsula to the west, is the only places where you'll find humans for the most part. That the central part of the Sinai Desert is uninhabitable. It's inhospitable. And, well, it took the children of Israel 40 years to cross it, and they had God feeding them manna from heaven and helping them every step of the way. So what happens when 2 million people cross through that gate, leave Gaza, and enter into Egypt? Well, you can imagine the biggest humanitarian disaster in Middle Eastern history. It makes every other exodus since the big Exodus from the Bible looked like nothing. And so Egypt's not jumping on board to let these people in, but I think at some point they'll have no other option. But I think Israel intends to prevent that. Because if the Palestinians escape into, and this includes Hamas, and you gotta understand that your average Israeli sees Palestinians and Hamas as the same thing. I mean, after all, they elected Hamas leaders in their first open election. That's what got us to this point. So your average Israeli sees the Palestinian people of fighting age the same as Hamas. It's just auxiliary Hamas to them. And there's an argument that that may be true. Of course, we'll talk more this weekend about women and children, because when I'm going to do this sermon on Sunday, we're going to talk about the value of children. But nonetheless, the Palestinians, I believe, are going to be forced. They dropped the pamphlets telling them to get to the bottom half. And what's going to happen next? They've been given 24 hours. I believe that's expiring probably by the time this video comes out. This may be prophetic or just a reiteration of the news right now as of Sunday morning at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. As far as I can tell, the people are still evacuating. They're still trying to find their way to southern Gaza. 1 million people, 500,000 of them children, are making their way south. Once that happens, once, I guess, Israel figures they gave them enough time to evacuate, then the ground incursion or invasion of Gaza is going to happen. And Israel has been gathering their troops. They've pretty much let everybody know they're coming. And what do you do before you come into a ground invasion? What did we do on D-Day? What did we do before the big Gulf War and the invasion of Iraq? You bomb the snot out of everything, and you don't leave two rocks piled on top of each other. You turn it into glass. You bomb it flat. Now, what effect will this have on the actual terrorists who are hiding in the tunnels? Well, if you think that there aren't tunnels headed south as retreats, back doors to the mole hole, then you don't know animal nature very good. Because if you ever shot gophers, you know if you shoot them in the hole they're poking their head up out, a lot of times they disappear and they come flopping out their back escape door, sometimes 10, 15, 20 feet away from where you pulled the trigger on them. And so they're going to escape to the south with the with the refugees. In fact, the Hamas have been telling the people not to leave northern Gaza. They've, in some cases, been reported as setting up roadblocks, turning people around and telling them to go back into Gaza. And people will say that's because they use them as human shields. That's partly true. But I believe that the Hamas is simply moving through the tunnels, and they need a little more time. They need to keep the civilian population overhead as long as they can, so they have time to move their massive supplies of rockets, their hoarded food, all of the remaining hostages, and all of their resources through these narrow tunnels. It takes time to move people and supplies through these narrow tunnels. But trust me, I believe the network of tunnels extends all the way to the Jaffa Gate, okay, all the way to Egypt. And maybe even under the gate. Don't. How far do the Hamas tunnels go? I'll tell you this, the land there is perfect for tunneling. And they've had a long time to plan for this. You know, they started this war with this attack. You think they didn't think it through? You think they didn't say, hey, what are we going to do when Israel invades the Gaza Strip? So they're working a plan as well. So Israel intends to drive all of the people out, exposing the remaining Hamas fighters, and fight it out with them in the rubble of Gaza City, with the intent of exterminating them. However, I just think Hamas isn't falling for the okie doke, and they're going to move all of their supplies out of there. They're moving all of the hostages south. They're moving all of their materials and weaponry south, and they're just going to continue to move underground as the Gazans, the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, evacuate to the south. So as soon as the people get out of the way, Israel's going to begin carpet bombing and destroying what's left of Gaza, and the intention being that the Palestinians will never return to Gaza City and northern Gaza, because there won't be anything left to return to. The destruction will be so complete that they'll have to use GPS just to find out where their property used to be, because the street signs will be gone, the roads will be gone, the landmarks will be gone, and it will be nothing but a field of rubble. And they're intending to make it so the Palestinians won't ever want to return. Then they're going to drive the Palestinian people into southern Gaza, and they're going to keep moving the evacuation line. Once people get across the line where they have now, and they pummel all of northern Gaza, they're going to split the land again and say, you need to get south. The Hamas fighters have followed them, which is going to be true. They're going to follow them. They're going to go with their people. They're not going to stay behind and fight it out with a superior army armed with 21st century weapons. They're just not going to do that. They're going to move. And they are moving. And that's the reason they're stalling, is so that they can get moved. So this line will keep moving until 2 million people, or whatever's left of them after all of this killing and destruction, are going to be huddled and crammed into a corner. And they're going to keep doing this until international pressure stops them. And then they're going to, when it hurts, they're going to push a little harder. And when you whine, they're going to push a little harder. They're going to try to find that international breaking point of public opinion. They're going to try, Israel's going to try to do as much to these people as they can, destroy as much of Gaza as they can, push these people into as tightest corner as they can. And then they're going to put up another wall. And you want to talk about an open-air prison, you're going to have absolute destruction in there. Absolute chaos. Absolute starvation. It's just the humanitarian crisis we're about to face is going to break the heart of even the most cold-hearted war hawks. And they're going to push that to the point where the whole world is going to turn against Israel. This is prophesied. I said I wasn't going to get into biblical prophecy in particular, but this is actually prophesied, that the whole world would hate Israel and become enemies of Israel. And I think this is the pathway to it, by doing this. And they feel justified, and I'm not even judging. I'll save that for my sermon on Sunday. We talk about the cost of children and all of this. How does God see children? Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. I didn't forget that song. Some of you might have. So they're going to drive the Palestinians into a tiny corner. Egypt may let them escape into Sinai. Egypt may go to war, with Jordan, which has been relatively peaceful for the last couple of decades. They've been staying out of it for the most part. And they're going, I think we're probably going to get involved. Hezbollah is going to get involved from the north. Israel's going to find themselves split with their operations in Gaza, and they're going to have to defend Tel Aviv and their portion of Jerusalem from the West Bank. West Bank's heating up. Right now it's slings and rocks, but they're going to break out the rifles at some point. Jordan army may cross over into West Bank to defend it from Israeli incursion. Stuff's heating up with Hezbollah to the north on the Syrian and Lebanon borders, and we could see them surrounded, which, once again, I hate to keep going back to biblical prophecy, but Israel getting surrounded by its enemies and descended upon is something that has been purported to exist in Bible prophecy, depending on how you turn the page, depending on how you look at it, right? With one eye open, if you squint. But enough of them have hinted to that it looks like that this is what's happening. This is one of the reasons I came out and said, we're in the end times, this is it. You got about 7 years to wrap up your life here on earth. And I hope to see you on the other side. I hope you stand in the evil day. I said that recently, and this is why. This is why, what I'm laying out for you. So, if left unchecked, if a greater war doesn't break out, if Israel can keep public opinion more or less in their corner, then their intention is to drive all of the Palestinians into a tiny little compact area. And if Egypt won't let them out and into their country, which there's a reason why Israel may not want that, because the Sinai Peninsula is a big place. And you turn those people out into that desert, they're going to be bitter. You drove them out of their home, you destroyed their properties, you destroyed their civilization, you expelled them out into this desert, and they're going to turn radical fast. And you think Hamas is big now, wait till that happens. So I do think it's Israel's intention is to basically put all of these people in a prison camp and only allow women and little children and old people who can't fight back into Egypt, and keep all the rest of them in the world's biggest prison camp. Concentration camp. The Israelis are on the other side of the wire this time. Ooh, I can't believe he said it. I can't believe he said it. It could be the final solution. Don't. I guess they decided what's good for the goose is good for the gander. They're going to create the world's biggest ghetto, the world's biggest prison camp in southern Gaza by forcing all these people out and only letting out the very best of them. That's my estimation. How much they can get away with before the Arabs pour over the border from every direction is your guess is as good as mine. I don't think that the Arab world is going to stand by while Gaza is systematically reduced to rubble from top to bottom, with the very southern portion being turned into an enormous prison camp, while the bulldozers clear the upper half of Gaza Strip for new Israeli settlement. I just don't think the Arabs are going for it. I don't think they're going to lay down this time, so war in the Middle East is going to break out. So we know that Iran is a supporter of Palestine, Hezbollah, and Hamas. We know that Iran hates America. We know that Iran hates Israel. And we know that Iran is allied with Russia, who we are involved in a proxy war with in Ukraine. So what happens when that carrier group attacks Iran over the coming invasion of Israel? What happens when Russia looks down and sees yet another one of their allies being pummeled by American bombs and American warplanes? Are they going to sit by the sideline? Because they're already got their nose out of a joint for our many hundreds of billions of dollars that have gone over there to Ukraine that we're using to fight a proxy war against Russia. They're not happy about that. They're not forgetting that. That is at the center of their focus. And now when they see Iran enter into this conflict and the destruction, we're going to do to Iran what Israel is doing to Gaza right now if Iran gets involved. I think you all know that. So what's Russia going to do? Bing, bang, boom. Bing, bang, boom. It's a domino effect. Russia will enter into a war against the United States. If the Israelis are allowed to do what I believe they intend to do, then this is the inevitable pathway to World War III. And the end of the world as we know it. Right? What do they call it? Tawakani, the end of the world as we know it. So, how does that affect America? Well, devastates our economy. Potentially could draw a nuclear fire onto the homeland. We're talking gas prices that you can't afford to drive a moped. We're talking food prices through the roof. We're talking rationing. We're talking everything World War II had, except also add in terrorist attacks on the homeland because of our porous border, and potentially Hamas cell groups and Hezbollah cell groups and Iranian terrorist groups have been infiltrating our country through the southern border for the last decade at least, and there are sleeper cells all around America. Some of them have come out of the woodwork to protest in favor of Palestine and their Hamas attack on Israel, celebrating the death of these Israeli children, and others are just biding their time, sharpening their knives, and waiting to bring the destruction to the homeland of the United States. It's dire, my friend. You need Jesus. You need him more than you did yesterday. I need you more than yesterday. I need you more than words can say. I need you more. We need Jesus more than yesterday. And we can say that every day from here on out. You will only survive this by putting on the full armor of God, by finding your shelter in the arms of God, by hiding yourself in the cleft of the rock of ages. Get on your knees, America. Get on your knees, world, and welcome the Messiah, because the second coming is upon us. He will come to put an end to the destruction. Brothers and sisters, you need Jesus, and you need him now. We'll talk in the future about how Jesus will protect his Christian church, how he will protect us from this. And through your faith in God, you will find a way through what's coming. But it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad. So tell me what you think in the comments section. Do you believe that basically a genocide and a rounding up of all Palestinians is the goal here? Where do you think this stops? When do you think enough is enough? What is Israel's goal and how do they get to it? Leave your comments in the comments section. Please, if you got anything from this, if you appreciate a bird's eye view and a balanced look at these foreign policies and affairs and issues and how they're weighed against Bible prophecy, please support this channel. I think you're getting a lot of information here you won't get anyplace else. If you don't support this channel, it will go away. There's a link in the description to PayPal. There's also a link there to Cash App. You can find my P.O. box there. You can find my email address, and you can send me messages. I'm about out of coffee. I even had the big cup, the big Texas size cup today. I'm out of coffee. I'm out of time. So we'll see you next time on Coffee Talk.